Yeah, okay, so I gotta tell you, I'm not ready for this because I mean, we're at part 6 of the Seattle Newsboy Union, and quite honestly, this is a good point to wrap everything up, but I really don't want to because I have learned so much. And I've said throughout this series that this was a chunk of history that I didn't know about my home state. I lived in Seattle for some time. And I mean, even growing up in Washington State, there's a lot of things, like I knew about the Great Fire and all that. That's something that we learn about because that was such a big deal. And then when I was living in Seattle, I got to see a lot of the stuff in the museum and, the artifacts and all that. But the Seattle Newsboy Union, considering how much it was a part of the community for so long. You think about it, 1892, and about the time uh the stock market crashed, that's pretty much when it fizzled out. And that's a long chunk of time for these kids to be having. I mean, they gave money to help with a canal. They helped with orphans, giving, they did a lot of charity work. Let's just put it that way. They did so much charity work and helped so much around the community. Yes, they were rebellious kids and they didn't help in the community in certain ways. They were teenage kids, they were preteen kids, little kids, uh, and everything. You're going to get that everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are, they're going to act like that. When you get a group of kids together, that's what they're going to do. And we saw that. I mean, you think of the little boy that his parents abandoned him, his grandpa was doing everything. And he finally talked to the judge and said, "We're going to have to put him in reform school. I don't know what else to do." How many other instances that we don't know about did that happen? Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And we did see that. We saw where some kids would just send a letter to the judge and say, "Yeah, I'm doing better now." And that the only reason they said that, it's just like these YouTubers who do their apology video and they're not sorry. They say it because they're saying the words, but they don't mean it. Just like the kids who were in reform, they were thrown in there, but they wanted out. And they didn't want to go through the rehabilitation. And there was that one guy that we saw where once he was an adult, he was still stealing. He was a criminal. He didn't learn anything. And you should have learned something because now you're constantly in prison. It doesn't, that's not the way to do it. And, but not only that, the fact that these kids would help cater to celebrities. I mean, the fact that Mark Twain was in Seattle and these kids helped wine and dine him, and you had Noodles Fagan who came. That one was fun. That one was so much fun too. And this New York newsie who traveled all over the world. And I'm going to keep researching that guy because he's a trip. He's an absolute trip. And now I will admit that I was probably reading it the wrong way, but from what I was reading and everything, it sounded like he had a soft spot for Seattle. It could be that, he made deals with other places as well to help the kids. I would, sure. And so don't get me wrong, but I enjoyed learning about Noodles Fagan. I really did. I'm just, I'll say it again. I'm just surprised with all the research that I did for the New York side. I never heard of that guy. But I'm glad I did. I was, I had a lot of fun learning about him. And just like Trilby Collins, Krabby Burke, I tried to find more on Krabby. He's my favorite. I mean, that poor guy. I mean, poor kiddo. But you find your favorites, the tragedies that happened, um, and the fact that the, I mean, this opened my eyes to uh how structured it was, because I always had that specific mindset on how newsies were treated and everything. These kids were treated like little businessmen. I mean, it was like when that one, uh, oh, I can't, Cecil, when little Cecil died, and the newspapers were talking about, well, this is where he sold newspapers. You could have seen him. He was a bright and cheery little fellow. Here's where the funeral will be. And then they talked about how many people attended the funeral. I mean, that's like how people talk about celebrities now. I mean, you would expect that with excuse me, that kind of reporting with like Rudolph Valentino. So, it did. It opened my eyes to how, and again, like I've said throughout the series, is this was the Wild West. Seattle was not the big city that it is now. Um, it was like a pass through because, of course, there was San Francisco with the gold rush, back in the because it was established in 1850. Little bit of a recap, Seattle was established in 1850. And so it was still a baby. And so San Francisco had its gold rush, and then people were passing through to get up to Alaska. So yeah, it was the West. And so, but still, when you have all these newsies who are considered like, with the reporting that they did, and when they're saying, well, these kids work for the Seattle Intelligencer and this is where you could find them and all that stuff. I mean, there was one, I don't know if I put it up, but I'll put it here. And one of the kids, his grandmother died, and they put out an article about it. They took the time to write an article about the fact that this kid is in mourning because his grandmother died. So, yeah, I mean, I I've said before this was a big chunk of history that I did not know about. The Seattle Newsboy Union, when I found out about it, I was thinking, "Oh, okay. So these kids went on strike before the New York side did, like 8 years before, 7 or 8 years." I was not expecting any of this. I mean, you know, Trilby Collins and a lot of these other kids and the celebrities that uh, talked to them, came to the, the fact that this union did so much charity work. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that this was the only one that did charity work. I'm sure that there are others. I mean, considering that there were, uh, Seattle didn't have a band. Tacoma did, but Seattle did not have a band, and they had to depend on Tacoma. They had to set aside their differences. We did see the struggle between these So, so there is that. There were newsboy bands in other states and in other areas. So yeah, there were plenty of charity with unions and everything. In fact, if you remember with the talking about Mark Twain, and there was a little bit of a rivalry there where they were trying to say that Seattle was the better one, and it's like they were trying to tell Mark Twain that this was the better place to be, and it's like, but yeah, seeing where a lot of the kids from other places came and settled here. There was the news girl that had been from New York and she came here. And then, of course, Trilby College. Once the Yukon Gold Rush got big and a lot of the kids like Trilby decided to retire from selling and went up there and and everything that we have learned, all the kids that we have met, I have enjoyed. I've enjoyed this journey so much. And it's funny to me that for as much as I didn't expect to come back to the New York side, I was trying so hard to stay within the Seattle side, but it's all connected. It's funny how these kids will join arms, so to speak. You know, because they see themselves as one big family. So like when the news girl came to Seattle, when the New York news girl came to Seattle and she was welcomed with open arms. And they even said, "Well, yeah, she's from here and everything." And I mean, she's from there and all of that. So, but she's she was the one that would dress as a boy and they were like, "Oh yeah." Everything. You gotta do a double take on her. And then of course all the because I think I talked about this in the last one with Noodles Fagan, or it could have been the one before that, where a lot of the judges and lawyers and politicians and even the comedians would come out, the entertainers, let's say that. So all of these people would come out and they would help support the Newsies and what they did because they were Newsies. So it was one big I don't want to call it collective, but yeah, not a clique. No, because it was just one big community. I know I'm saying that word a lot, but I don't know what other word to use. And, and it's just too bad that that's lost now. And I know that when Noodles Fagan was talking about in the last video I did, Noodles Fagan mentioned how you know that the city is alive and well when you hear the yelling of the newsboy and all of that. And it did. It kind of broke my heart because we don't have newsies anymore. And but now I do have a couple of things that I do want but before I give the big bombshell, now as it turns out, the name Newsboy was popular with uh ships. Hey, so this is editing me. First of all, if you hear the thunderstorms out there, well, they're not thunderstorms, but the storming out there, sorry. That's why Pooh is sitting it out. But real quick here, when it comes to these newsboy ships, the dates are all over the place. So, and it makes it really hard. There's a ship that was in, like I said, in 1862, and the captain of that ship was just those shipwrecks that you see from the Newsboy are awful. They're absolutely awful. But it turns out that it was like lost at sea. I guess. It was either lost at sea or something as far as they know. And but here's the other thing is that at the time that it was lost, there was another ship named Newsboy. There are log books, and I will have this in the description box. There were log books for a ship named Newsboy that was built in 1889. Now, in 1887, there was a schooner named Newsboy in Michigan that was going around Lake Erie. Okay, now the ship in Seattle was a schooner. There is also a steamship. Okay, the schooner was in the 1890s. The steamship was in 1900, and the steamship got in a lot of trouble. Like the accommodations were terrible, and yeah, the captain just did not have a good reputation at all. The schooner, however, the captain did have a good reputation. So, and it was really confusing because at one point somehow the newspapers got the schooner and the steamship confused. Now, there is another ship, and it showed up in one of the nautical magazines in the 30s that used to run here. I don't know if it still runs here in the Pacific Northwest, but and I'll show it here. And this is another ship. Now, it was shown at this time to show off uh, vintage ships because, of course, at this time they were using metal and all that stuff for the ships. Wood was out of style, and this is a wood ship. So, I'm not sure if there was like a warship that was Newsboy or what have you here in the Pacific Northwest. This doesn't really look like a warship. Again, my ship uh knowledge is not the best. But anyway, I will have that information in the description box for you to look up those other newsboy. There was also there was a fishing ship that was sunk in 1885. And yeah, a lot of newsboy ships. It was very odd because usually when you see, on a final note here, usually when you see ships, they're either named after somebody, which is still done today, or mythology, or nautical something or other, like the Enchanted Pearl. I see that one a lot, because there was a video that I was going to do about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was scrapped because I just couldn't get it together. And I did some research on ships from the 1700s, and that was one of the things was learning the naming of ships. And that was the thing, was that they used a lot of mythology terms and they would name after royalty a lot of times. That's like why you have like the Queen Anne and the Queen Mary and those kinds of things. And and then of course, because it would show your loyalty to whatever royalty or something like that, or you were just a big butt kisser or something. I'm calling it like it is. Okay. Or at the same time, you would name it after, like I said, like the killer whale or something. Something menacing. That's why I really don't understand why for Assassin's Creed they call it the Jackdaw. It's the dumbest bird ever. But so anyway, that's basically in a nutshell the newsboy thing. And there was one more actually. There was a tin ship. When was this? It was in 1898. There were people from Scandinavia, three guys in Scandinavia who had a uh, tin ship named the Newsboy, and I'll put that right here. And I guess it did. What does it say here? There was a long voyage in the Pacific from St. Michael to within 365 miles of Cape Flattery, have been brought to Seattle. So these three gentlemen made this trip with this tin boat. So there's another one for you. I had forgotten about that. I'm sorry. But so anyway, I will have that information in the description box for you. And that's now the bombshell that I have. Let's see, where did I put it? Oh, it's over here. I'm always hiding things on myself. Of course. So I tried to find more information on Krabby and some of the other people that we talked about here in Seattle. And now, when it came to Trilby Collins or Pie Eater, um, because again, that is who we claim. We claim Pie Eater. There's proof of it. So Henry Trilby Collins is his full name, and Washington State has him. That's all we gotta say. But as it turns out, after he went to Alaska, and he tried to get his a fortune there, I couldn't find anything of him. I kept looking and looking and looking and just figured, he didn't get his fortune. And so he just disappeared, you know, and well, not so much. Trilby. Oh, I was so happy. As it turns out, he moved to Nevada. This kiddo moved to Nevada. Now, um, I found in 1909, there were some that said 1908, 19, but they were just little things. It wasn't much. And so he was basically traveling and yeah, he was trying to find himself, I think. And it turns out in 1909, he was working for the fire department in, in Nevada. So January 6, 1909, he's at a meeting for the fire department. Somebody has resigned, and he's at this meeting with three other fellas, and they got to work something out. I saw several, there was one incident, it was like a 4th of July incident that happened, and he had to stand as a witness. And as part of, he was a witness for the fire department. And I believe that was in 1911. 1910, 1911. I think it was probably 1910 now that I think about it. But and I don't think I saved that one. But this particular individual was a over dramatic about something. I mean, basically they just didn't like that the fireworks were popping off. And it sounds like they had uh uh oh, what do you call it? Curfew. back then as well for how long you can. And I guess this person wanted the curfew to be bumped up. And it's like, no, everybody stopped when it was time. And because uh I followed it as long as I could. And it sounded like even the newspapers were losing interest in this trial. It's like the person was then trying to say that they had mental anguish over these fireworks, and it was like, get out of here with that. No, you didn't. Then, oh, good heavens. How come you never talked about it before, you know? But in 1911, I have another one here, and it talks about, is this the one where it talks about so no, this is the one where it says reports have uh Trilby Collins mining in Oregon. So he's trying his hand again at mining in the Klondike. Mr. Gore's, let's see, got ahead of myself. Residents of Tonopah, and I'm sorry if I say that incorrectly, who know Gorst and Trilby Collins will be pleased to learn that those two miners who have mined from Klondike to, well, pretty far south, have struck it rich in the Oregon country. So he he didn't do so well in Alaska, but in Oregon, he did. I tried to find I tried to find more of him like in 1912, somewhere in there. Couldn't find anything. So I guess that once he struck it rich, that's when he decided. So, I don't know if he got married or anything like that, but I'm glad to see that he did better. He was working for the fire department for a while, and he was mining because I was worried about him. I really was. It's good to see that he was uh uh that he found himself basically. And yeah, because there was one in here. Maybe it was the last one that I showed where it talked about how he was, or no, that was one. Uh, there was one that it talked about a drowning that he witnessed, and they were the reporter was trying to push this idea that Trilby allegedly uh, been had done in this particular individual, that it was a murder. And I don't believe that because there was another when Trilby was a lot younger and he was going down to Sacramento and, doing his traveling for a while, back when he was a teenager and early 20s, back in like 1890 and everything. He also saw a drowning and it traumatized him. I don't believe for a second that he would cause harm to some. No, I don't believe that. I think the reporter was, yeah, I don't like that. I had a real problem with that. And so yeah, that frustrated me. And yeah, but the article itself talked about how he was a former newsboy and that kind of thing. So, but and then it went into the accident that happened and then tried to turn it on Trilby. That's where I had the problem. And it's like, not today. No, because yeah, I didn't show that particular one because of how bad the accident was when he was younger. And but anyway, in closing, yeah, I was glad to find Trilby. He did a lot better. He didn't do so well in the Klondike, but later on in life, he did a lot better. So I hope Krabby found love somewhere. Sometimes the that first love, uh, who knows, but it did break his heart. You could tell. And but again, and yeah, I'll put that information of what I did find about the Newsboy ships. I know I didn't explain it very well, and I'm sorry. But this was so much fun. So much fun for me, and the comments that I have seen, you have really enjoyed it. Uh, who knows, I may come back to it. I don't think I'll really close it up, officially close it up because there may be more that I'll find and come back to it. So let's put it at that. Maybe I'll find more on somebody and come back. We'll do it that way. But anyway, before I ramble on more, I'll close up here.